Hey, what's going on? My name is TJ Jones, and welcome to another edition of the State of the NFL podcast, as well as the State of the Saints podcast. If you're watching this on the State of the Saints podcast channel, I really do appreciate it. Much love to each and every one of you that has stopped by. Before we get started, just like always, got to do a little sound check here. Want to make sure everybody can hear me. I don't want to get into it and people are like, oh, man, you sound weird. You sound funny. So if somebody can give me some confirmation that you can actually hear me loud and clear, I would really appreciate that. But in the meantime, just want to, give a special shout out to everybody in the chat as they file in. As y'all can see, I'm at work right now. And, we want to talk a little bit about some playoffs football. Unfortunately, the Pittsburgh Steelers can't get it done again. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about some New Orleans Saints news, free agency. Who should the New Orleans Saints target in free agency and why? There's a few names that I feel that could add some firepower to the New Orleans Saints if they can't get that type of firepower in the draft. But let's go ahead and get started. I want to go ahead and get right to it, man. Got to talk a little bit about Mike Tomlin, and unfortunately, we got to talk about something that I don't want to talk about when it comes to Mike Tomlin, because anybody that has watched me, listened to me throughout the years know how much respect I have for Mike Tomlin. I mean, I love myself some Mike Tomlin. I said if I was an NFL player, I would want to play for Mike Tomlin. I mean, he comes with a level of intensity and energy that very few coaches can mimic. And, he's the longest tenured coach in the entire league. He's been with the Pittsburgh Steelers for 19 seasons. Since 2007, he has a Super Bowl championship, and he is one of the most respected head coaches in the National Football League. But yet again, the Pittsburgh Steelers lose in the playoffs in the first round. They fall to the Houston Texans 30-6. I mean, the Houston Texans defense is legit. It kind of reminds me of those Baltimore Raven teams in the 2000s, like when, they just out there just completely dominating. But yet again, Mike Tomlin gets bounced out of the playoffs. And of course, we got to have this conversation about Mike Tomlin and should Mike Tomlin be fired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, we all know that the NFL stands for not for long. It's about what have you done for me lately? It's about the results that you put on the field each and every year. And it's not like how it is where you put money in a bank and then, you put it in there, you leave it in there, and it starts to, appreciate value. It's not that. We know that it's not that type of game when it comes to the NFL. And regardless to how good you are as a head coach, you got to continue to win. And Mike Tomlin, for 10 seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers could not get out of the first round. Now, you can say that Mike Tomlin went 19 seasons and never had a losing season. Now, you can say that about him. But what does that actually mean if you're not getting to the promised land? We've seen that John Harbaugh was fired by the Baltimore Ravens, and he was with them for 18 seasons. I just think that maybe, just maybe, it's time for Mike Tomlin to go in Pittsburgh, and not because he's a bad coach. I'm seeing some videos going around and people sharing old videos of Terry Bradshaw talking about how Mike Tomlin is not a great coach and this, that, and the third. I just think that people, sometimes they just overreact, right? It is hard to maintain success in the National Football League, let alone 19 seasons. Everybody is not going to make it to the postseason. Everybody is not going to make it to the playoffs every year. Everybody's not going to make it to the Super Bowl every year. And I just think that sometimes we don't have an appreciation for greatness or how good someone is, because we are told and systematically programmed to believe that a coach isn't good if he doesn't make it to the Super Bowl. And that's just not true. Like you want to have stability within your organization more so than anything else. And this is what Mike Tomlin provides. But I do feel like there's some complacency here when it comes to Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers. It just, I'm probably going to be speaking to people that got an everyday job. Let's just say, for example, you've been on your job. I know some of the people that's watching this right now, you've probably been on your job 10, 15 years, right? You pull up to the parking lot, you pretty much park in the same place, so much so that people don't even park in your spot. They call it your spot. Like it wasn't designated to you, right? But it's just the fact that you've been there so long, you just the elder statesman and they allow you to park there. You go into the building, you say good morning, you probably got the same routine, yada, 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 right? I think that's kind of what Mike Tomlin is dealing with when it comes to the Steelers. And sometimes you just need a change of scenery. And I'm speaking to some of my Saints fans out here right now. Now, as we know, Sean Payton has the Denver Broncos with the number 1 seed. And we know that Sean Payton spent 15 seasons with the New Orleans Saints, generating success, winning playoff games, taking the team to the Super Bowl, right? He leaves and, he goes to another team. And now you look at what Denver is doing right now. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery. Sometimes you need a different challenge. And let's make no mistake about it. If the Pittsburgh Steelers were to let go Mike Tomlin, he would have a job. He would be able to pick the job that he wants. Doesn't matter where he decides to go. And, like I said, I don't have an issue with that. But we know that the Rooney family, the family that owns the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are extremely patient. I thought that this was the most amazing stat I have ever read in the history of sports. The Pittsburgh Steelers have not fired a coach since 1968. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? They have not fired a coach since 1968. Chuck Noll, the legendary Pittsburgh Steelers coach, came in 1969 after they fired the previous head coach. And since then, Chuck Noll was the head coach, he retired. Bill Cowher was the head coach, he retired. And now you have Mike Tomlin. So you only had 3 coaches since 1969 on this football team. So to say that the Pittsburgh Steelers are the epitome of functional organizations would be an understatement. But once again, I don't feel like this is an indicator of who and what Mike Tomlin is. I just think that maybe it's just time for a change of scenery. We've seen this before, right? With Andy Reid with the Philadelphia Eagles. All those NFC championship games, all those playoffs, exits. And, Philadelphia Eagle fans were like, man, we like Andy, but, we can't get over the hump with Andy, right? So Andy Reid ends up being let go by the Philadelphia Eagles. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, and we all know the rest is history, right? He was able to get over the hump. He aligned himself with the best quarterback of this generation, Patrick Mahomes, and he finds success. Maybe it's just one of those situations that Mike Tomlin has to go through. But I just think that when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have got to fix their quarterback situation. No disrespect to Aaron Rodgers, but he's 40 plus years old, and you need to, turn a page. You need to get yourself a young quarterback. I don't know if it's in free agency. I don't know if you just need to draft one. I know they have Will Howard on the roster. He's going to be going to his second year. He came out of Ohio State. If you follow college football, you know how good he was in that college football playoff that led the Buckeyes to the national championship game. I don't know, but they need somebody that can come in, that can bring some level of stability and, a youthfulness to the organization. Now, Aaron Rodgers, he gives you that knowledge of being that elder statesman, the legendary quarterback. But we know that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is indeed weak. And I don't care how great you are. I don't care how legendary you are. If you are 40 plus and you spent 18, 19 years in the National Football League, I mean, your body is going to, go through some very difficult situations. So I just think that when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, I just think that he's good, but at the same time, he's not what he used to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't expect Aaron Rodgers to be what he was, at 27, 28 years old when he was out there in his prime for the Green Bay Packers. But they need to fix the quarterback situation and also the identity of the defense. Like when you think about the Pittsburgh Steelers, like you think of a team, that that is led by their defense. And, and in a game, they did make some opportunity for themselves. C.J. Stroud, that's another story for another day. I mean, 5 fumbles, dude. I mean, come on, man. What is going on here? Like, I don't know. But all I'm saying is it's just something that's missing from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, when I was growing up, I was a teenager, and I was watching players like Troy Polamalu out there. And, man, you had all these different great defensive players, Joey Porter. Like, they set the tone. And you know that you were going to see some smash mouth, snot bubble type football from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And although, you got TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Cam Haywood, you still got some really good core guys, Joey Porter Jr. You got some talented players on the team, but something is indeed missing from this football team. And I just hope that they find it. Offensively, I think they got some talented guys on the team. I mean, you got DK Metcalf. You got Jalen Warren. Maybe you need to get yourself a little bit of a bigger back that can actually, give you those tough yards. I don't have anything against the running game, but I just think that they need a little bit something more. But, I mean, they went 10-7. The AFC North wasn't the best division. It was a down year for all the teams within the division. The Pittsburgh Steelers were able to kind of, sneak into the playoffs in a do or die situations versus the Baltimore Ravens. But when it all comes down to it, they have got to find a way to get back to playing some Steeler football that involves them winning and getting those deep runs in the playoffs. And like I said, I have no issue with Mike Tomlin. This isn't an indicator of who he is and what he is as a coach, but maybe it's just time for him to maybe turn the page and take on a new challenge with another organization. Let's go ahead and stop right there, and then we're going to go to some Saints talk, and some Saints fans in here want to talk Saints football. Yeah, it's time to fire Mike Tomlin. Need a change of location. Yeah, I don't think I know when people hear about a coach getting fired or a coach getting let go, the first thing that they think about is that coach is not good enough to coach, and that's just not the case. Like, sometimes complacency can be the biggest issue. Doing the same things, doing stuff the same way, going to the same place at the same time, same regiment, like, it can become redundant. And sometimes, you get tunnel vision, and because you have tunnel vision, you're not looking at the things on the side of you. So maybe it's time for a new parking space, a new key card, a new office. You get me? And maybe that's something that can help Mike Tomlin, and maybe make him feel like he can be rejuvenated. I just think that that's just what it all comes down to. Whatever team gets Mike Tomlin will have a really good head coach, and I guarantee you they're going to be primed for success. Tomlin has fumbled the offense for quite a while. Probably time to go elsewhere. Yeah, man. I mean, it's been a struggle offensively for the Steelers for quite some time. They brought in some different coordinators like Todd Haley. They got Arthur Smith right now, former Atlanta Falcons coach. But it just seems like the offense, it's pretty stale. And I don't know. I think he does a really good job, defensively. Like, they always have a formidable defense. It's not the defense that we have grown to love throughout the years, but it's still solid. And, they're still going to get things done. But at the end of the day, the offense has been the Achilles heel of the Steelers for the last decade. And you have to look at the head coach and who you're hiring. And it's important because, like we've seen with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, how they were able to get really good coordinators over the last 3 to 4 years, right? And then when they got Josh Grizzard this year, the offense took a step back. But the years before, you got Lynn Cohen, who ended up being a head coach of Jacksonville, brought them to a 13-win season. You got Dave Canales, who led the Carolina Panthers, despite what their record was. They went to the playoffs. They won the NFC South. So those are 2 offensive coordinators that Todd Bowles had as a head coach that found success with the teams that they're on right now. And Josh Grizzard couldn't live up to that expectation, so they took a step back. And I just think that Mike Tomlin, his inability to pick that right offensive coordinator has been the Achilles heel of this football team. Mike Tomlin has always been a good coach. You just don't stop being a good coach. It's just maybe some decisions that were made that has caused this team to kind of lose their way. Owen, thank you very much for $10. Says Tomlin is a good coach, but sometimes you just need to move on and try something new. As a Seahawks fan, we went through the same thing with Pete Carroll, and it was the right move to get a new coach. Yeah, I mean, thank you for the $10, Owen. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, you were able to get Mike Macdonald, and Mike Macdonald has done a really good job. Of course, your Seattle Seahawks are the number 1 seed, and yeah, I mean, Pete Carroll, he laid the groundwork. I'm a spiritual guy, right? I'm a spiritual guy, and I'm pretty sure everybody has heard the story of Moses, right? Moses, led the children of Israel, to the promised land, right? But he couldn't go, so he had to, give the staff off to Aaron. Like that's basically what it is. Like he brought them as far as he can possibly bring them, and now it's time to pass it on, and that's just what it is. And and there's that old saying, like you can you show up. I'm paraphrasing here, and when you start winning some games, like you're a hero. But if you live long enough, you're gonna live long enough to be that villain. When Mike Tomlin was with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2007, after Bill Cowher retired, they went to the Super Bowl, right? They won. He won a lot of football games. Their identity didn't change. He kept the car at 10-2, right, on the road. And like I said, man, he did a lot of good things. But when we're talking about a playoff drought that's 10 years, right, 10 years without a playoff victory, like people don't care about what happened in 2007. They don't care about the Super Bowl championship, right? They don't care about those things. What they care about is what have you done for the organization lately. And right now, it's just been some double-digit wins that have amount to absolutely nothing. It's almost to a point where the Pittsburgh Steelers fans are like, yeah, I know we're going to have a winning season, but what's going to come of it? And like I said, you live long enough, you're going to live long enough to be the villain. And right now, Mike Tomlin is the villain. And it is not anything that he did in particular. It's just the fact that the success that he had at the beginning of his career, is the reason why people have expectations now. So, it's kind of like one of those situations where he was so good very early in his coaching career that, people want him to replicate that. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to do so. Steelers should have never got Aaron Rodgers. Hopes he not the reason Mike Tomlin loses his job. No, I don't think it would be the reason why. I mean, this isn't a guy we're talking about like 27, 28 years old where you're going to build your franchise around. Right now, Aaron Rodgers is what you call a football mercenary, right? I mean, you acquire his services in order for your team to be a little bit more formidable than they probably would be if he wasn't on a team, or wouldn't be. But I don't think that would have anything to do with Mike Tomlin being fired. I think it would have to be, just a combination of the one and done in the playoffs, and just feeling like the Steelers have lost their way. Like I said, man, it's sometimes a divorce doesn't have to be nasty, right? It doesn't have to be nasty where furniture is being tossed out, clothes being all on the lawn, and the police have to be called, right? Sometimes it can just be amicable, right? We haven't been seeing eye to eye for years, and you're a good person, I'm a good person, but I just think that it's best that we separate, and that's what we on right now. Like I think that people are always looking for the nastiness when it comes to these head coach and organization, divides, right? Like they expect for a coach to maybe have a soundbite taking shots at the organization and vice versa. But I just think that this marriage has gone as far as it can possibly go. And it's just time for each party to separate and go about their business and still be friends at the end of the day. Like Mike Tomlin will be in a Ring of Honor. Mike Tomlin, in my opinion, would be in a Hall of Fame. So, he definitely going to be in the Steelers Hall of Fame. So at the end of the day, like I said, maybe it's just time to separate. That's all it just basically comes down to. Doc, thank you very much for the $4.99. Says the Steelers are the epitome of what being mediocre the NFL gets you. Too far from the bottom to draft impact players, can't address real needs. That is true. Like that is true. Like we commend the Pittsburgh Steelers on being the most functional organization in sports. Like you can't knock them for that. But their biggest strength is also their biggest weakness as well, right? You benefit from being a successful franchise, right? You become the envy of all other organizations because of the stability that you have acquired throughout the years. But at the same time, you picking in the 20s every single year, so you can't address the quarterback situation unless you have to pay a king's ransom in order for you to move up to do that, or you have to hope that you get a situation where you can have a free agent quarterback come in and help your team generate some levels of success. Now, I'm just wondering, like, what are they going to do? Like, what quarterback can come in free agency that can help this football team, or who can they draft in order to try to bring some stability and success to the organization? Let's see. Nate says, I respect him because I know it's hard for monitor coaches to stick around this long, but it's hard to ignore his lack of success based on the talent he had. Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, I don't look at Mike Tomlin as a failure, right? I mean, I just think that we have grown accustomed to these type of situations, Nate, where we look at a coach and we like, yeah, it ain't working, right? I mean, it's one of those situations where I just feel like he would probably benefit, the Steelers will probably benefit if he goes to, another team. Because if you have a coach that comes in and they don't generate success, I don't think they will be mad. Like, honestly, I don't think let's just say, for example, Mike Tomlin leaves the Steelers and they end up hiring a coach, and let's just say, for example, they roll with Will Howard as the quarterback, right? And let's just say Will Howard don't work out, and next thing you know, they picking in the top 10. Fans will probably be upset that they season was a failure, but they also would probably have a level of happiness because it's like, man, now we picking the top 10. Maybe we can get a quarterback and maybe we can be able to get ourselves back on track. That is what's going on. But when it comes to Mike Tomlin, like, Mike Tomlin is so good of a coach. And this is why I go back to what I said at the beginning. Like, we have been systematically programmed to believe that a coach is good only if he goes to the Super Bowl or shows up in the Super Bowl every year. And that's just not the case. He is a really good coach. He's a really good coach because regardless to how the Pittsburgh Steelers look each season, he has them with a winning record. So that's the indication that he is a really good coach. In 19 seasons, he has never been below 500 when it's all said and done. So you can't knock him for that. And I'm pretty sure some of these teams wish they can have something like that, because in all seriousness, if Mike Tomlin was in the NFC South, he will win it every year. You're playing in the AFC North, one of the best divisions in football, more times than not, where you're chasing after the Baltimore Ravens, who will probably have 12 or 13 wins, flirting with the number one seed. The Cincinnati Bengals over the last couple of years, despite the fact that their defense is horrible, they're going to win about 10 or 11 games. I mean, the Browns, they're at the bottom of the division, but they can beat anybody because of that defense. So if Mike Tomlin was to go to, the division that they play in is so good that 10 wins can't get you in the playoffs. Mike Tomlin would go to the playoffs every single year. He would be the greatest coach in NFC South history if he was to go to one of these teams in the South and have 9 or 10 wins. Like, it's just the division that they play in, right? The expectation is high. But, you have a winning record every single year. More times than not, you're going to be making the playoffs every year if you're in the South. But let's go ahead and stop right there. Speaking of the NFC South, let's go ahead and move on, talk a little bit about the New Orleans Saints and free agency. The New Orleans Saints, of course, going to have a little money to play with, and I think Saints fans are excited about that. Hooray, 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 right? Been a long time since the New Orleans Saints could go into free agency and, actually do something without, basically, looking under the couch cushions, trying to get pennies and trying to get, these serviceable players and trying to make them be all pros. But this is an opportunity for the New Orleans Saints to go out here and plug in some holes and fix some needs here. And I think everybody already knows that the New Orleans Saints' top priority in free agency should be interior offensive linemen. We know that the interior offensive linemen have not been good for the New Orleans Saints. Trevor Penning, they moved him to guard. Cesar Ruiz, he's been with the New Orleans Saints since 2020. It has not panned out. Dylan Radins, he was serviceable, but not good enough. And the New Orleans Saints need to fix the interior of this offensive line. I think we all can agree that they got some studs on the outside and Calvin Banks Jr. and Telese Fuanga. You got a stud with Eric McCoy, despite the fact that he has been injured over the last couple of years. That's something that you might need to address or maybe, need to discuss maybe when it comes to the draft. But there are some really good, talented interior linemen that you can actually go after. One is Tyler Lindenbaum. Some of you probably know him. He played with the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens did not pick up his fifth-year option. Had a lot to do with the fact of the asking price of $23 million, for a interior offensive lineman. And of course, you got all these different guys on your team, and you have to wonder to yourself, who can you pay? You can't pay everybody. And, I know that most teams will probably look at this and be like, man, the Baltimore Ravens are crazy. They're insane. What's going on here, man? You need to pay this guy. But one thing the Baltimore Ravens have had going for them, and they have found success every single time, they do a really good job at scouting and bringing in guys, and they pay their guys. Now, they'll go out and get a free agent or two to add to the already well-drafted team that they have, maybe get some, some leadership, a little bit speed at a certain position, but they draft really well. And it gets to a point where they draft so well, they have to get rid of some really good players. Like I can think about when they had Justin Tucker, right? And they also had Will Lutz as a kicker. And I can just remember that, they had to end up getting rid of Will Lutz because they had Justin Tucker. Both kickers, were really, really good, throughout their time in the National Football League. Will Lutz still kicking right now. And they do a really good job at drafting guys. And they have to get rid of some really good players that end up going to other teams and become really solid players for them. So Tyler Linderbaum, I think that he should be a top priority. Now, he's going to act for top dollar because he is the top interior offensive lineman in this free agent class. But what are we talking about here? We're talking about a guy that can come in, that can fix something that you have needed to be fixed for a very long time. And like I said, I just think that your running game will improve, the passing game, pass protection, when it comes to pressure coming up the middle will, improve. And if you wanted to, I don't know, decide to move on from Cesar Ruiz or bring in a rookie interior offensive lineman to compete in camp against Cesar Ruiz, you can do that. Or maybe get somebody that's a little bit of a rotational guy who can play guard and center just in case, the Eric McCoy injury bug continues to, rear its ugly head. But, Tyler Linderbaum would be a top priority for me. You got to fix this interior offensive line. Of course, like I said, he's the top offensive lineman in his free agent class. But at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. Elijah Vera Tucker, he is an interior offensive lineman for the New York Jets. Have had some injury history. And I know when people hear injury history, they're like, oh no. But I'm looking at it like maybe a guy, if you don't want to go out here and exhaust all of your money for the most part in an interior offensive lineman like Lindenbaum, you can go and get Vera Tucker and, sign him to a one-year deal, like where he has to prove that he can stay healthy. And if he doesn't, then no harm, no foul. You can go once again in the draft and you can draft yourself an interior offensive lineman as an insurance policy, which the New Orleans Saints should do anyway, right? So that's another guy. I mean, he has a lot of talent. His talent isn't the question. It's just the fact of him staying healthy and being available for a team. And like I said, I know when people hear about that, they're like, well, here we go again. But he has a lot of talent, a lot of talent. But like I said, if the New Orleans Saints go out and go after an interior offensive lineman, that should be top priority. That should be top priority for them. Another position I feel like the New Orleans Saints need to look at would be the running back position. I am a huge supporter of the New Orleans Saints going after Breece Hall, the running back from the New York Jets. This is a guy who just wants to be successful. He's a guy that just wants to be put in a situation where he can go out and thrive. He's a really good, solid running back. You get your offensive line fixed, I guarantee you he's going to be 1,000-yard rusher for you. Hasn't really had too many injury issues. Has played every game throughout the season, for the exception of his rookie year when he only played in 7 games. But that was at the beginning of his career. He has played 3 more seasons since then, and he has been the epitome of health. He's had, his little bumps in the road, but he has been available. I like Breece Hall a lot. I just think that, this is something that the New Orleans Saints need. And I know some people, they are wondering what can Breece Hall bring to the table. I'm just telling you, man, sometimes a player can be within an organization, and some people don't realize how special that player is due to the fact that their organization is not very good. But if the New Orleans Saints get their hands on Breece Hall, you got yourself a really good running back. At the wide receiver position, I think the Saints, if they want to, they can look at that. Me personally, I don't think the Saints wide receiver room is as bad as people think. It's just the fact that these guys haven't been healthy enough for people to appreciate what they can actually bring to the field. Trey Palmer, I feel, is a really good wide receiver. I think he brings depth to the Saints wide receiver room. He's a guy that can stretch the field. He's a guy that, that is a really good route runner. I think that he is very talented. I mean, we know what Devon Vele can do. When he was out there, he was making some really good contested catches. People were comparing him to Mike T and Marcus Colston. And then you have Jalen Polk, who just needed a change of scenery, in my opinion. And it just seems like his relationship with Tyler Shuck is growing. I was on social media earlier today, and I see these two out here fishing together. So, that goes to show you the kingship and the relationship that they're trying to establish with one another. And that goes a long way. And, of course, Chris Olave, he's going to get himself a new contract. I just think that's just how the Saints operate. They like to pay their guys. And, Chris Olave has shown that he deserves to be paid. Now, we need to be talking about numbers. That's not me. But, if we're talking about a guy who is a all-pro, you can talk about, he's a second-team all-pro or whatever. It's all-pro, right? That's what people are going to know him as. Like, people are not going to say, second-team all-pro Chris Olave. They're going to say all-pro Chris Olave. So when you put yourself in an all-pro conversation, it kind of, makes you the number go up. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So, I'm pretty sure the Saints are going to try to find a way to pay him. So that, and if the Saints decide that they want to go into free agency, there's a few guys that they can choose from. I mean, of course, you got George Pickens. He had a monster season, 93 catches, 1,429 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I don't expect for the Dallas Cowboys to allow him to walk. Now, you can talk about maybe some of the money that the Cowboys are going to have to pay, but when you no longer have Michael Parsons, you got a couple first-round draft picks, you got some money that you can actually play with. And if you want to bring back George Pickens, you probably can. But I'm pretty sure he's going to be asking north of $30 million. And the season that he had, we know that the highest paid wide receiver in the league, if I'm not mistaken, is Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, one or the other. But they're making like $35 million a year or something like that, something crazy. So if George Pickens, he wants to reset the market, we're talking about like $37 to $40 million. That's insane. All right, then, of course, you got Dwan Jennings for the 49ers, a guy that is a really good player. Some people, they got their thoughts about him, but he's a dog out there on the field. And you also know about the issues that the 49ers have with Brandon Ayuk. I don't know what the heck going on with that, but we know that, if you're not going to bring back Ayuk, you got Ricky Pearsall, who just can't stay healthy. Like, you're going to need somebody out there like Dwan Jennings. So maybe, 49ers may consider paying him, but if not, that's somebody that you can possibly consider. He had 55 catches for 643 yards and 9 touchdowns. Really good season for Dwan Jennings. Then you got Alec Pierce. This is a very popular wide receiver, played for the Indianapolis Colts. You had Saints fans. His name constantly comes up. I don't know about, Alec Pierce. I think that he's a talented guy, but like I said, I mean, if you're talking about Chris Olave, who being that number one guy, I think that Alec Pierce, if you were to sign him, you would expect for him to be your top receiver. And I don't think the Saints really truly just need that guy right now, especially if they're going to pay Chris Olave like that. And like I said, the supporting cast for the Saints, I feel like they are going to be able to do some things offensively. If it was me, I would draft a wide receiver. I think that you get yourself a young guy inside of that locker room that you bring in on a rookie deal and you can make some plays and learn from some of these veterans on this team. I think it'll be fine. I said this a few weeks ago, and I'll go and I'll say it again. If the New Orleans Saints decide to move on from Taysom Hill, which I'm pretty sure they will, you can bring in a guy like Deebo Samuel to kind of fill that void, right? Deebo Samuel kind of provides the same type of offensive prowess that Taysom Hill does, despite the fact of, Taysom Hill can actually drop back and throw the football. But we're talking about running in between the tackles, lining up in the backfield, lining them up in the slot. We know that Deebo Samuel can make some plays. So, if you want to, maybe, keep that Taysom Hill type package going, you can maybe go after Deebo Samuel, maybe sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal. He still is a really good, solid player in the league, still making some noise. So, you could probably bring in somebody like Deebo Samuel that can make some plays. Now he'll be 30. I think he'll be 30 at the start of the season. But like I said, you're not looking for Deebo Samuel to be 49ers Deebo Samuel. You're mostly just looking at him to be that guy that can possibly provide a little bit of what that Taysom Hill package. And like I said, that you're going to get a really good playmaker, a guy that can get those yards after the catch, which I feel that the New Orleans Saints desperately need at that position. So those are a few names that I can think of that the Saints can go after. Of course, if you want to go on the defensive side of the football, maybe, an interior lineman, if you don't want to bring back Nate Shepard. Nate Shepard had a pretty good season, but if you don't want to bring back him, you can maybe look at the interior lineman. You got questions when it comes to Cam Jordan, and I know that they're trying to get young. You got Carl Granderson, but, Carl, for the exception of that game versus the last game of the season, I just feel like there was some weeks where he was actually missing. And I think that the Saints need a consistent pass rusher, a guy that's going to consistently go out there and make plays. I think there's a role for Carl Granderson, but you have to wonder to yourself, like, we're talking about a full season, of consistency. Can he give you that? And if not, then maybe you need to look at one, bringing back Cam Jordan or bringing in somebody else that can actually be that high motor edge rusher that you need in order to get the quarterback on the ground. All right, says get Jermaine Bernard. Says Saints should use the money for O-line and D-line. Games are won in the trenches. I agree, man. I think that they definitely need to address the interior of the offensive line. And the interior and the defensive line, they got some really talented interior linemen, 3-4 interior linemen that's going to be coming out in this draft. So you probably can end up getting a talented one there. I'm going to read two more and then I'll get up out of here. Says, I want to see what Polk can do with Olave and Vele. I think that's going to be a really good combination. I think it's going to be a really good combination as long as each guy stays healthy. I think that the Saints will have a formidable wide receiver room. And you just hope that, Tyler Shuck can continue to build on the momentum that he had. And I know, I know people just waiting for the bottom to drop when it comes to Tyler Shuck. People are like, oh, they got tape. They got tape on him. Like, okay, whatever. This guy's talented as long as he keeps his head, you keep his head like steady and just focus and continue to grow and get better. I don't have an issue with that. I also think it's funny that people bring up Tyler Shuck's age, like, oh, he's 26 years old, he's a rookie. But I'm like, man, do you know how long quarterbacks can play based on the rules of the game? Like, Tyler Shuck can play for another 12, 13 years in the NFL. Right? It's not like how it was in 95. If you like 26, 27, when they can take your head off, like any play can be your last, right? They protect these quarterbacks. So, like he can play for, like I said, he can play for a decade plus. So I mean, I know some fans don't want to hear it, and I know a lot of what they talking about. Oh, look at the tape, and like they're gonna have tape on Tyler Shuck and all that kind of stuff. I know that's their way of trying to put their mind at ease that what they're actually seeing right now is not a guy that can be a demon in the NFC South. But if he keeps his head steady, he keeps his eyes on the prize, the Saints can be very dangerous, man. They got tape of him with no starters. Look, I just think that, man, I think that's a slap in the face to every single organization. And for them to say, oh, now they got tape on them. Like, every game that Tyler Shuck has played, they got tape. I'm pretty sure, like, these teams are seeing that. So all I'm saying is, like, people, like, I know the individuals that say those things about Tyler Shuck are basically trying to put their mind at ease. I don't think they even believe that. They want it to be true. They want him to suck, right? They want him to be bad. They want him to be terrible because, they don't want him to be that monster in NFC South, because we all know for 15 years the Saints had a monster. They had a monster in the NFC South that people were like, once he retired, they breathed a sigh of relief because they were tired of watching this quarterback just pick apart their team every single week in Drew Brees. So why would you want to see that again? And, there's a level of envy, because if you look at it, since Drew Brees retired, who has been the top quarterback in the NFC South? You had other teams that just kind of still trying to find it. Like Falcons still trying to find the replacement for Matt Ryan. Like Baker Mayfield provides stability. I mean, Bryce Young played really well in the playoffs, but like he still hasn't lived up to what Cam Newton left behind. So if the New Orleans Saints, like within 5 seasons, find a guy that can give the organization stability post Breeze, like that's a pretty quick turnaround. I mean, not for a lot of Saints fans because they want to see the playoffs, but if you have a guy that not just be a guy, like no disrespect to the Bucks, Baker Mayfield, unfortunately, pretty good, but he's a guy. Like that, he's not like looked at as one of the upper echelon quarterbacks in the NFL. Like the first couple weeks of the season, he did, but he's not the guy that they consistently look at and be like, oh, he's the future of the NFL, one of the faces of the franchise. Bryce Young, like he's starting to figure it out, but nobody looks at him that way. Nobody looks at Michael Penix or Kirk Cousins that way. But since Tyler Shuck has come into the league and it's a small sample size, people are excited about what they actually are seeing because he resembles an elite quarterback. And I don't know if he's going to end up being that, but that's a start. But I want to say thank you all for checking out this edition of the State of the Saints and the State of the NFL podcast. Really do appreciate it. Much love to each and every one of you. And, the show is never over. You can always put your comments down below. Where you feel like the Saints need to go after? What position group would you target? Who would you consider paying? Who wouldn't you pay? Right? Who would you want to draft? You can put all those comments down below. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you subscribe to the State of the NFL podcast as well. We talk football over there. We'll be back on that channel pretty consistently. We'll be doing some duo stuff. So if you're a Saints fan, that's great. We're going to be talking about Saints football, but we're also going to be intertwining with the NFL and going around the league. So make sure that you subscribe to the State of the NFL and the State of the Saints podcast channel. And also tonight, NFC South Roundtable will be the final episode of the covering the 2025 season. As we know that the Carolina Panthers got eliminated from playoff contention. Good effort by the Panthers, but now we're going to be talking about that. But it's going to be the final episode of the 2025 season, putting it in the books as all teams in NFC South are sitting comfortably on the couch or getting a tan in Cancun, and we're going to be talking about that. So make sure that you tune in to the NFC South Roundtable. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your night whenever you're checking out this podcast. Until next time, I'll see you down the road.